Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Coaching Roundtable. Today we're celebrating men and fathers. So it's Father's Day here in America. We celebrate it here. And I'm just really excited to talk about the contribution that men, married or unmarried, fathers or not fathers, and boys make to our society. You know, they're half of the equation of humanity. And I think the pendulum may have been swinging this way or that way in terms of being female forward or the future is female. And while I was a champion of women empowerment, we may have over empowered ourselves a little bit. So maybe it's time to dial it down and find some harmony and balance. And we'll talk about all of those things with our amazing coaches here right after we look at my slides. Okay, here we go. Share them. Okay, and right after the technology, there we go. Cooperates, woohoo! Present. And there it is. Yay. So I did like snapshots, like if we were looking in the family picture album. So dads with kids, and then some guys that are a little bit older, realizing that men and fathers, kids, adults, they all contribute to the fabric of our society, even if they're chatting over chess in the park or teaching little ones the feeling of flying by tossing them up in the air. So here we go. So in the show notes, we always have some research, and there's are some jumping off points that we can talk about here, and then do look at the research. So we look at men and boys and encourage leadership in them. Not that women can't be leaders, but we encourage leadership in men. Men are looked to as providers and protectors. And I think we have to be careful about stereotypes, but I also think we can, lean into what we commonly find in gender roles. Uh, Men are good at teaching boys in particular life's hard lessons. So if a little one scrapes his knee and runs to his mom, she's soothing him and putting, medicine on his knee and putting on a band-aid for his boo-boo. And a dad will say sometimes, rub some dirt on it and get back out there and play. So I think we need both kinds. I think we need, this blended approach. Goal setting, I think men are particularly good at that. Making friends, men, particularly older men, can have a little more trouble with. But it's really important for men and boys to learn how to make friends and then maintain those friendships. Building families, it takes two to tango, but men have a very important role in building families. And then just decision making kind of in general. So let's look at some memes. Here's a dad full duty. Two kids and a third up top walking along. He's like, I'm in full dad mode with three kids. I can hold one hand on each side and put the little one right up top. I got all the kids. So here's a meme about dad jokes. Who laughs at dad jokes? Everyone is the small pie. Dad is the big pie. Dad is always laughing at the dad jokes. Okay, up at the top right, here's sort of an upset mom saying, I will ignore him all day so he knows I'm mad. And here's a dad saying, what a nice quiet day. So it's all about perspective. And then here's a little note from an adult child to dad. Dad, I'm sorry for all the dumb stuff I did when I was a kid. If it helps, you only know about half of it. So don't worry, you didn't have to be aware of all of it. So, well, we have a jumping off point, and in the show notes, there's a little bit of history about how Father's Day came about. It kind of started in 1910 in Washington State, just as Mother's Day started in another state by one woman in 1908 who really wanted to celebrate her mother. But it was Woodrow Wilson in 1972 who finally made it Mother's Day. And then I guess we could do a Father's Day the month after. The Father's Day was kind of well, I guess we have to do a Father's Day too. So it's only been official since 1972. There is an International Father's Day started by a history professor in the West Indies in 1999. So he's trying to push back a little, I guess, against the culture. And then the American Institute of Boys and Men, AIBA, I'm not really sure, AIBM, I guess, but the link is in the description. And they're actually tackling how boys are doing in school, the kind of work opportunities, the sort of general culture. And they're kind of speaking about what they're finding and then what we might do to make an improved environment for men and boys. So it's a big topic, but I love celebrating half of humanity, men and boys. So, Brian, can we start with you? I know you have some thoughts, and I appreciate the men in my life, but women can be trouble, men can be trouble, women can be great, men can be great. I think we get a little bit of all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll jump into some stuff. I'm gonna try to keep it positive. I don't want to get too much on a soapbox because I could do a lot of stuff on this. But just to mention some things that I think are relevant that should be said, but just kind of trying to keep it on more of a positive, bent. I do think there is sort of a war on men in the West, and there's many, many examples of it. And I think it has made it much harder for men to psychologically just be men.
Mhm,
And so I think that's made it harder to celebrate men. There's a whole bunch of factors we could go over here, but I think basically men in the West are in sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation, like a catch-22 situation. So it's things like you need to be strong and lead, but then like women don't want to a lot of times follow your leadership. So
mhm,
it's like kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. But then if you don't lead, you're beta.
mhm,
And then you need to be strong and masculine, but you also need to be in touch with your feelings and sensitive and share your feelings. It's kind of this like, how do you do all of that in one person all the time?
mhm,
So there's sort of, I think a lot of men are sort of left in this vague, ambiguous psychological vacuum where there's just no clear guidelines of how they can be excellent at being men.
mhm,
And even when they show excellence at being men, then that's toxic masculinity.
mhm,
It's like, so what's healthy masculinity then?
mhm,
Right?
mhm.
Have we even defined that? So I feel like we've defined the negative side, but we almost don't even define the positive side
Part of what we're
because
doing today.
there's not so much interest in that actually. Like there hasn't been enough interest in that to even define it
Mhm,
in the cultural conversation, which I think says a lot right there. But, I also think there's kind of been a very dumbed down, like watered down version of sort of our definition of masculinity has been very dumbed down. So, like when I hear these conversations, a lot of times I just hear protection and provision.
mhm,
That's like people, that's how they define the masculine role. So basically, you're just a gorilla who's like a bodyguard. And then you're also supposed to be like a worker bee slave and go like bring home the bacon. And that's it. Other
Uh,
than that, it's so there is a lot of this stuff out there. And again, I'm trying to keep it positive, but I do think this needs to be addressed because this speaks to why men aren't being celebrated more, or even why it's hard for men to be better and therefore be more celebrated because they're sort of existing in this environment of the culture. Um, and yeah, sometimes like, if you'll listen to feminists or something on podcasts, and I've listened to a lot of this stuff, a lot of times they'll just casually blame men for all the problems in history. Um, one point is like, weren't women there too? Like, what? They didn't do anything to stop it, or they didn't, they kind of explain that. There's a lot of points that are sort of being ignored through history. Also, yes, men did cause tons of problems in history. They also created tons of solutions.
Mhm,
We
mhm,
can't ignore that.
mhm,
Most of the inventions in the history of the world come from men.
mhm,
Do we celebrate men for that nowadays? Not really. A lot of the science, architecture, engineering, philosophy, a lot of this is stuff that in general is more masculine pursuits. It doesn't mean women can't do it,
mhm,
but in general, more men are interested in these things and end up doing these things and therefore producing works in these areas. And women have other things they're interested in and they do great in those areas. And there's some crossover,
mhm,
but there is also a gender divide just on interests, right?
mhm,
So, but I do think probably part of this comes from some of the negative agendas that are sort of controlling the culture. I mean, if you want to weaken a society, you have to weaken the men
mhm.
because they're the ones who are going to fight and resist, right?
Yeah.
So creating this sort of framework where men are sort of psychologically put down just by the, larger cultural narrative that's going on, or reduced testosterone levels. Testosterone levels are lower than basically ever in history.
Mhm.
And there's different chemical reasons for that and all that kind of stuff. But basically, it kind of all ties into this. Am I soapboxing too much or
A little bit, I
a
guess
little bit?
it's true you can paint a picture culturally, that the pendulum has swung maybe a little bit far in one direction. But as coaches, we know the person begins with their life. They begin with their
Yes,
experience.
that's
They
true.
begin with what they want to do. I think a good example is I've known men. My mother's father, my grandfather, was an inventor. He invented machines. There was no machine he didn't understand, and he invented new ones. He was so good at that. His mind was organized that way. Of course, my mother married a man who was a thinker, not an inventor. And my grandfather could not stand that he couldn't fix the car or fix a broken can opener. Like, how do you not know how to do that? And my dad was a writer in aerospace, and he'd say, well, I earn enough money to pay somebody who does know how. So I buy a new can opener, or I have the mechanic at the garage who's better at that than me, and I pay him to do his job. That's how I do it. And so both are valuable. The mechanic who knows how to fix it is valuable. The guy who pays the mechanic to fix it is valuable. I think your own experience bringing what you have to the table, aside from maybe some stereotypes, men have all kinds of values, the same as women. There are women who decide a role is, motherhood, a woman who wants to stay home, and a woman who says, I don't think I want to be a mother. I don't default to nurturing, and I think I want a big career in advertising or something. So people in their own lives make their own choices, and this is how coaches can help. What are the choices you've made? What's going on for you? And as we talk today, I'd like you to speak about how, as men, you don't first think, I wonder if there's a coach who can help me with this. That's usually not the first thought. Please, Brian, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, so to that point, as far as addressing coaching, I do think there's more men who are in the mindset of try to figure everything out on your own.
Mhm, mhm,
So they're not necessarily going to reach out to a coach as readily.
mhm,
Whereas I think women generally feel more permission
mhm.
to kind of seek help from the group or from someone, and they don't feel like shame about that,
Mhm,
or they don't feel like they're weak or something because they have to do that. Some men do struggle with those issues, but anything you can do to improve your life is great. And everyone should do these things, whether you're a man or a woman. Like if a coach can help you, reach out to a coach
mhm, mhm.
for
Fantastic.
sure.
Well, so did you have some more points you wanted to make? I didn't want to interrupt you.
So I'll get off the soapbox a little bit. um, Here, I'll just point something out. I want to because we don't talk about these things that much. Just imagine like how many times there have been fathers who show, their kid how to fix something in the garage,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
And maybe the dad doesn't say the words "I love you,"
mhm,
but the child can feel how much care and attention
mhm,
is being given to help the child learn this thing.
mhm,
And so that feeling of love, that feeling of my father cares about me is being communicated.
mhm,
And I think we tend to underestimate how much men do these types of things. I don't think men are being given much credit
mhm,
for this in the cultural discussion at large.
mhm,
But there are tons of men
mhm,
who have done these things all throughout history. I mean, this is pretty natural
mhm,
for men to do these kinds of things with their children. And same between like a husband and a wife. Very oftentimes, a wife will vent to a husband, and the husband is trying to find ways to fix her problem,
mhm,
to help the situation. We don't hear about this a lot
mhm, mhm,
in on dating podcasts or in conversations about relationships today. But
mhm.
men do a lot of these things, and sometimes women will actually complain about this. They'll say, "Oh, he's just trying to fix my problem. He's not just letting me vent. He's not just really listening."
Mhm.
But the thing is, we also have to give men credit for the good things they are trying to do for people around them,
Yeah.
including their wives, their
Mhm,
children.
mhm,
Like, if your husband has positive intent for you, he's trying to help you,
mhm,
appreciate that.
mhm,
So that speaks to celebrating,
mhm,
men and fathers.
mhm. Wonderful. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think having a broader perspective, and then as a coach, bringing down to, well, these are the cultural circumstances we can agree. I think podcasts find the most outrageous person. The clips are the most, crazy take. And if we watch 50 clips of crazy people, we think the whole world is crazy because that's kind of the intake we're getting, right? And that's what gets clicks on podcasts. It makes the algorithm happy. So we can opt out of what's making the algorithm happy. But Dean, you have men in your coaching practice
I do.
working with all kinds of things, whether it's employment or divorce or, how to grow as people. They have big life questions that they want to get their arms around. Talk about how men find you and work with you as a coach. And then I know you have some ideas in general about men and boys today, how we can celebrate them.
Well, here's the interesting thing. I've actually had multiple. So when someone wants to start a coaching
Mhm,
practice with me or, have a session or whatever, I
mhm,
always have like a 15-minute get to know you kind of call.
mhm,
And I've had many guys in that call, that sort of preview call, express to me their anxiety about just speaking to a coach at all.
mhm,
And I think they have a kind of misunderstanding of that. Excuse me, that therapy is about just feeling just feeling for an hour, right?
mhm.
And maybe, I mean, it is possible that the sort of therapy industry or the therapeutic enterprise is now so corrupted that a lot of what you go to therapy for might be
Yeah.
to feel bad for an hour and have somebody give you a pat in the back and tell you that it's, they understand.
Mhm,
But so I have had several guys kind of come and say, "Well, I don't know about this," because basically that's what they're thinking. And
mhm,
I always try to emphasize to them, "Well, that's not really what I do.
mhm.
That what our task together is number one, to expand your own awareness of
Yes.
who you are and what kinds of things are driving you that you are unaware of. So it is about expanding your level of information.
Mhm,
And second, it's about expanding your skills that help you to achieve whatever the goal is that you want." And
mhm.
I find that a lot of guys are more open to that kind of process if it can be framed as a process that is goal directed.
Yeah.
And so
Let's accomplish something.
yes. And so I do think I just have guys come with a kind of misapprehension about what the whole thing is. And
Mhm,
I think they think, like I said, they're just going to come and it's just going to be about their crying for an hour or feeling sorry for themselves or whatever. And obviously what they don't want is they don't want to get into a position where they just feel weak.
mhm.
But ironically, what happens is actually they're already in the weak position when they come to me.
Yeah.
And that our work together is often about getting them out of a weak position, which they think is a strong position, and
Mhm.
into an actual empowered position.
Back into their strength.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's very interesting. And I just, in terms of working with men as a coach, it's I'll just it's very gratifying, especially when you have clients who actually make progress because they actually care about the process. And there's a sense in which too, I do think it helps for a man to come to something like a coaching relationship with a general willingness to grow
Mhm.
as opposed to just like a hyper focus on solving this one problem. Because often so for example, let's say he comes and he has a hyper focus on solving this one problem, and the one problem he wants to solve is that his wife's behavior. And so he like gets hyper focused on a problem that he can't directly control.
Mhm.
And then sort of growing into a person to whom she would respond differently
Mhm.
is seen by him as an obstacle to actually getting what he wants, which is for her to change.
Mhm. Well, I think there are a lot of women in therapy who are trying to get their men to change instead of to actually change themselves. So I think in coaching, one of the valuable things is to say, well, we start where you are with what you have.
Uh-huh.
And then there's kind of an inventory of the limiting beliefs we have to get out of the way. You'll
Right.
never change. She'll never change. You're 100% right. She's 100% wrong. And what's hard, I think, right now, and maybe we just open this discussion. Certainly, I've worked with men. I mean, most men think I can't work with them on these problems because I'm a woman, I guess. So sometimes the men that I work with are in the last resort category.
Mm.
I've tried everything else. I guess I'll try a session with you. Like they have little hope or possibility that we'll get them there. We do get them there, but we all live with stereotypes in our head, about who can do what for us. And one of the challenges is the court system is tilted towards women. Bad behavior in, winning the divorce wars. Sometimes the people are not punished for that bad behavior. You have a court decree that says this, it's routinely being ignored, and there are no consequences. So you feel like you have a system that's against you, and how do you fight the system? And as coaches, we have to say, let's set the system over here. You're not going to fight the whole cultural system, and we're going to work in your life. The patch of lawn that's yours, we're going to cultivate that. And when you see possibility that you can live differently, and then the world responds to you differently because you're positive and you're upbeat and you actually have some happiness every day, you see flowers blooming, you hear birds singing, and the heck with, yeah, it's wrong that the culture is tilted that way. It will tilt back. You're not going to tilt it, but you can find everyday happiness. You can be empowered. You can take the reins of your life back. You're not subject to the whims of a situation that you actually can't control yourself. And so that opportunity for empowerment, um, recreating the possibility that they can lead a life they want to lead in spite of these other things that are in fact true. We aren't going to argue that they're not true. I have a, a story to share, and then let's open it up. I know we have a shorter session today, but sometimes I pick up kids. I have a friend who travels, and he and his wife are divorced, and every once in a while neither one of us can pick up the kids, and I volunteered to be the default emergency option. So it's the first week of third grade for one of these little kids. And I asked, how is third grade going? And he says, it's terrible. He's 9. Third grade is terrible. And I said, oh my goodness, in the back seat, why is third grade terrible? Girl favoritism.
Mm.
Girl favorite. He's 9 and he's figured out that there's a cultural shift towards females. And so I'm like, well, what happened? I didn't do anything wrong. This girl did something wrong. She blamed me, and the teacher believed her. And it's the first few days of class. The teacher's nominated, but the default is that the little girl's probably right. So he got punished. Something he didn't do because third grade is going to be terrible. So whether you're in third grade or whether you're involved in a marriage or you're dating or you're raising kids, there is a way forward. But culturally, you're not wrong, but yet there are things you can do to be happy and successful anyway. Okay, I'll leave it to you guys. Who wants to chime in?
Well, yeah, you're right. I mean, the laws in Western society are heavily rigged against men in many categories. We don't have to go over it all, but there's many different examples.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, I'll make an interesting point here in terms of celebrating men. So if you look at like Ayn Rand's work, in terms of her personal feeling towards men, in the way she was attracted to men,
Mm-hmm.
she acknowledged that she actually needed to see men as heroes in order to be romantically attracted to them.
Mm-hmm.
Like she had to see men as like paragons of excellence or virtue.
Mm-hmm.
And without that, she didn't feel like the eros, the sexual
Mm-hmm.
chemistry or the attraction. So I think one of the things that people don't realize is as so many people in general, or, mostly feminist type of narratives have really just belittled men, shamed men, put men down, as that mindset spreads, like it's going to be harder for women to actually feel attracted to men once they believe these things about men.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, like, if you believe all this stuff, like all men are trash or this or that, it's going to be hard for these women to fall in love with a man after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is another layer of kind of the breakdown of marriage, long-term relationships, the American family,
Mm-hmm.
all this kind of stuff. And it's the vice versa is true too, right? Like if men believe all women are trash, well, you're not gonna fall in love with a woman. Like if
Right.
that's
It's
really
what you'll
how
see,
you,
what you seek, you find. It
yeah.
turns out
I
that's
mean,
true. Mm-hmm.
you're basically not open to that kind of connection. So I think we need to celebrate women and celebrate men and get back into, seeing people in positive ways to facilitate relationships between all of us. But Dean, did you want to jump
Yeah,
in?
I will say something, then I got to jump out. But I
Oh,
think related to that whole thing about seeing men as heroes, and Ayn Rand was, shall we say, an unusual. She was not she's not a random sample of women, but
She's
there's
that's
probably
very true.
atypical. We'll say she's atypical.
Yeah.
right. So there's probably some general truth to that. But I think a lot of times what I see with men is that they are unaware of their own desires for themselves and their lives. And they just are so disconnected from their own inner experience that if you ask them, what is it that you really want in your life? What do you want your life to be like? They don't know. Now
Mm-hmm.
they when they even ask about desire, they automatically think of women, right? They want a woman, they want women, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, in terms of helping men to develop, the first thing I would say is you have to have a sense of your own desires apart from women.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of increasing women's level of attraction to you, the one thing that will increase it is that if you have a desire for your life that is not dependent upon them.
Yes.
But once if a man can get reconnected to his own internal compass and desires,
Mm-hmm.
the next step is, I think, reclaiming his some sense of autonomy and increasing some sense of agency.
Yes.
Because I think those things go hand in hand. The sort of lack of clarity about your desires, the lack of conviction about your level of autonomy and power,
Mhm.
It probably physiologically related to the overall decline in testosterone somehow.
Mhm.
But over and over again, guys I see, I those are problems that most of them have.
Mhm.
And if we want to celebrate men, it means in a way, it would mean celebrating men who don't have those problems as examples, right? Like
Yes.
men with clarity, men with ambition, men with
Mhm.
um, a sense
True,
of power and
true
agency.
agency. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Well, so how do people get a hold of you? And I know you have to.
Um,
Happy Father's Day. I know you're.
Thank you.
Yes,
Uh,
happy Father's Day.
Thank you very much. DeanAbbott.com, alifedesign.org, or just Dean Abbott on Twitter.
Fantastic.
See you
Well,
guys.
Good and Bouts, great to see you.
Yeah.
Hey.
So, do you want to continue the discussion or you want to
Yeah,
call it a
no,
day?
I would like to just chat a little bit about the generational differences.
Sure.
So, there are a lot of kids that in current generations are raised in divorce. They're raised without a father in the home.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of psychology that talks about that that's not necessarily a benefit. And
Mhm.
there's a generation of kids that live in two houses. They don't have a
Mhm.
home, they have two homes.
Mhm.
When they're with their dad, it's this way. When they're with their mom, it's this way. And there's usually some sort of warfare of narrative going on between the mom and the dad. And the kids just have to sustain themselves during the what did your dad say? What did your mom say? I just have to, how do I get out of this? I don't really want
Mhm.
to be in the divorce wars with mom and dad. So we have a generation or two of broken down nuclear family, and we actually have people having permission to never try to achieve a nuclear family. You have a child on your own, you don't want a partner. And so, but there are consequences to the child to not have male influences and female influences
Mhm.
sort of from the jump,
Mhm.
for people in human society. So I think apart from having coaches look at, well, where are you now? What do you have to work with? Asking the question about, well, what would make you happy? There are a lot of men who don't even ask that question. What do you mean, what would make me happy? I live to make her happy and to provide for the kids. Unfortunately, I've seen too many men become hostages to all the things I do to try to keep her happy.
Mhm.
She has this and she needs that and she requires this and I deliver that. And after a while, hostage negotiation after hostage negotiation, the demands just seem to level up. And this is not a winning scenario for the two people. I'm not happy because you haven't provided X. Her happiness is actually her job. His happiness is actually his job. It's not he has to make me happy or she has to make me happy. But we've kind of lost track of that somehow culturally, that there's a mutual bond to keep each other happy, but also to maintain our own sense of selves. If we've lost our aspect of happiness, we cannot be a happy partner in the home. And so restoring that internal happiness is a prerequisite for a successful, family relationship for men and women, for girls and boys. But particularly men are sort of kicked to the curb culturally right now. And I'm happy we have the opportunity to talk about you can work with a coach and change it in your world, and the more people that do that, the more the world will respond to the change. Peace begins with you, happiness begins with you, your own peace, your own happiness. And from there, you can make the world a better place. And men are oh so capable of making the world a great place.
Yes. I mean, you bring up a lot of stuff. I guess I don't know how much we should get into all of it, but um, yeah, men have done tremendous good. And of course, there's bad men out there. Of course, there's men who have done bad. But there's
Mhm.
plenty of women who have done bad too. But,
Mhm.
in the narrative, in Western society, we're a lot more used to holding men accountable. We don't really hold women as accountable as much anymore. For example, speaking to parents, like we have the term deadbeat dad. Do
Mhm.
we have that term for mothers?
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
No, but there are deadbeat mothers.
Mhm.
There are mothers who don't even watch their kids. They
Mhm.
just get
Mhm.
drunk and the kids run around, and if they hurt themselves, whatever. I mean, but we
Mhm.
don't even have a term for that because we're afraid to call women out
Mhm.
because of this long history of feminism and stuff that's gone on in the US.
Mhm.
We don't hold women accountable the same way we hold men accountable.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, and there's many examples of that. We don't have to go over all of it, but there's hundreds. There's many, many different things. Um, so, but yeah, I mean, I think in the example you were mentioning, like when you do have an example where like the man is working all the time, let's say, and the woman is a stay-at-home wife or mother, what happens in a lot of those relationships is he's busy, he's stressed, working all the time, but the wife has all this time to learn how to be a full-time manipulator and
Mhm.
figure out how to manipulate him and get everything she wants out of him. He doesn't have the mental time or energy to keep up with that. He's working all the time. So he basically can't compete
Mhm.
with the levels of manipulation he's dealing with. He can't like outmaneuver her pulling all the levers all the time because he's actually having to do real work all the time. So a lot of men end up in that situation. So they just end up getting manipulated all the time. Like you were mentioning, where some men just get to the point they have to just try to keep their wives happy or their kids happy all the time. And they basically lose themselves. They don't even
Right. They don't know how to
have
be
a
happy for
sense
themselves.
of their own happiness or their own selves anymore. Yeah.
Well, and traditionally, there's been a situation for women who will throw themselves into family life, be responsible for 3 or 4 generations of family, for the retirement party and the barbecues and the PTA. And often she also works. And so there's no time for her. She's just barely keeping up with everything that needs keeping up with. And
Mhm.
so I think we can find both men and women exhausted,
Mhm.
trying to meet all the markers. And long ago, they lost track of what made them happy. They are just trying to manage. And so I think coaching can help people say, let's just take an assessment about where you are. And then let's hold you accountable for the choices you've made. I think there's this drift that happens over the years. Well, we used to have a date night, or we used to get away for a weekend, on our anniversary without the kids, or we used to,
Mhm.
but it's kind of broken down over time. And now we cope. We are mutual partners in coping about the job and coping about the house and coping about the kids and coping
Mhm.
about the parents. And
Mhm.
we lost track of any kind of responsibility for our individual happiness. There isn't time, there isn't money to whine and complain about our individual happiness, but it doesn't require time and money. It requires a shift in perspective. So, upcoming, we have a roundtable about possibility, how to work with possibility. And one of the first things coaches do, and I'll have you speak to this and then we can wrap up. Coaches explore, well, what's possible? There are possibilities you haven't examined because you've been so focused on what's wrong, what's difficult, what you're trying to solve, what you're coping with. Let's move all that to the side and look at the possibility. If your needs were being met, needs you probably can't even identify right now, but let's say we came up with a list of these 3 things give you a pretty good day most days, just these 3 things. And we routinely delivered on those for you, for her, for him. What life would that look like? Let's just shift out of all I can do is cope and manage to what if we chose to thrive instead? What if we doubled down on what worked for us and we were choosing to thrive and settle for nothing less? Coaches can help you kind of reimagine the possibility of how you could be leading a happy life together. Please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And to speak to sort of a point you were making before, where both like parents are basically just coping.
Mhm.
So you can have situations nowadays where both parents have to work
Yep.
and they both have to take care of the kids and they both have to take care of all the other life duties and they're both exhausted. And basically, you can have your marriage break up because the entire thing just becomes stress of handling various duties.
You're on a
So,
sinking ship and you can't bail water anymore. Yeah.
yeah. So one solution to this is you have to kind of think about being a couple first, being
Yes.
husband and wife first, and then parents second.
Yes.
I do think that's really good advice because that ensures that you at least stay together as two parents. And it ensures that your mental health and your happiness is there because you're still dating each other
Mm-hmm.
as you go throughout the marriage, still go on dates, still
Yeah.
prioritize
Mm-hmm.
your relationship as a couple first.
Mm-hmm.
Get time away from the kids, get your mental health and your relationship as a couple
Mm-hmm.
right. And then you can actually bring happiness and a good energy to your children instead of just always being stressed, always being frustrated. Then you're broadcasting that energy to the children, and then also your marriage is in danger. And
Right.
then the kids are going to be grown up in a, broken home. So,
Kind of a
um,
lose-lose. Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that's good advice on that. And yeah, but I mean, the power of possibilities, like you're mentioning, there's always way more possibilities than we usually see. And
Mm-hmm.
speaking with a coach can really help you see those new possibilities for your life,
Mm-hmm.
see things that you haven't thought of, and also maybe see places where you're stuck and it's hard for you to move to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's because of a relationship. You feel like because you're in this relationship, it's hard for you to move in this direction because your partner doesn't approve or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Things like this.
Mm-hmm.
A coach can help you see that and untie those knots so you can go where you want to go.
Mm-hmm. There are some times where the answer is a divorce is the right answer. There are
Sure.
some times where one party has decided, I'm going to blame the other party for everything that's wrong, and I'm not going to come off that hill. I'm going to die on the hill that the other one, it's all their fault. Because then I take no accountability, no blame.
Mhm.
I just go reorient my life and just kick the other one to the curb, whichever one it is. So if you have a partner situation that is just going to die on the hill of I'm right and everything you do is wrong, you can't change their behavior, their perspective. You can only
Yeah.
change your own. But you can have a future of happiness. You can
Mhm.
be happy outside of a living hell that is a bad marriage, a living
Mhm.
hell where everything you do and say is wrong forever. Nobody can live like that. It's
Yeah.
not good for either party. And the kids are not thriving and growing while parents are in active civil war, right? This is
Mhm.
not a welcoming environment. So if it is at the point where the only dissolution is the right answer, then take the step forwards and do that. Sometimes you have to just admit to yourself, we're too far gone. We've had
Mhm.
last chance, and then we had a last chance after that. And this can't continue. And the other one, I can't change the other
Mhm.
partner. And so, okay, so dissolution is right. A clean slate will give us a new possibility to thrive in a world of our own making. Sometimes that's the only way back to agency is to throw
Mhm.
the baby out with the bathwater and start over. And so if that's where you are, there's coaching for that. How do you justify that we did everything we could and we can't? Civil war is going to continue. There's no peace treaty on the table. So, okay, we're going to do a line of division and we're going to separate things and we're going to live apart. Two happy parents living apart are much better for children than active civil war. It just is true. So
Yeah.
sometimes that's the right answer.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, you just got to figure out what's best for you. What's your
Mhm.
best next, move for your life and go from there.
I think, the question I ask is when you get to the point where, you've literally done everything you can and it's not solved.
Mhm.
There's no way forward, then just admit, okay, I gave it my best shot. There's no way forward. So this is what we do now. Dissolution is the
Mhm.
right answer. And but the happiness is on the other side of that difficult decision for both of
Mhm.
you. And an opportunity to thrive if there are children is on the other side of that too. But telling the truth to yourself, arriving at that conclusion is the next best step. Let's take an assessment about where you really are and then what the possibilities for you to thrive in your life, what do those really look like? And that's tough work that can happen with a coach. Coaches help people take action. They help people move limiting beliefs. Well, you think it has to be this way, but what if it was this way? Oh, maybe we could try that on for size and live differently and have a different experience. Coaches are really well designed for that. So I encourage people to join our community for free, to follow and subscribe on our YouTube channel, to celebrate men and boys and fathers in their lives, and yeah, to reach out. We have a team of coaches who are ready to help you wherever you are produce a result that you're happy with. And lots and lots of years of experience behind us. So, any final thoughts, and how do people get a hold of you?
No final thoughts. I think that's good. I think it was a good discussion.
Mhm.
Thanks for everything you contributed. I think it was really good.
Well,
And yeah, people can reach me at alifedesign.org or Special K Coaching on Instagram.
oh, very good. Okay. Well, until next time, celebrate the men and the boys in your life, and we'll see you here on YouTube.